Just read out the introduction a little bit because when we discuss syncretism in the art of Assam, initially we find conflict and only at a later period we find syncretism. So I just want to read that background. So my paper actually is divided into three parts. So first I shall have references to this conflict issues, sectarian conflicts. Now, the region of Assam is the meeting point of the Indic civilization and that of the culture of Southeast Asia. The Brahmaputra Valley of Assam had close links with the Ganga Valley in ancient times, and art idioms of the latter influenced the sculptural art of Assam. At the same time, Assam also had some close relations with the region of Southeast Asia in the remote past, specifically like Assam lay in the migration routes, etc. And as a result, we find certain artistic elements of Southeast Asia also in some of the sculptures. Now, the early literature of Assam indicates initial conflict between the followers of Shaivism and Vaishnavism. But by the 8th century, we find syncretism in art as reflected in the images of Harihara and Narayan. At the same time, certain elements of syncretism are also discernible in other sculptures, but these are just individual examples. Like say of Indra and Vishnu, where iconographic features of other deities are noticed. So first I shall discuss the references to sectarian conflicts as found in literature and oral traditions. And next I will follow by a discussion of the epigraphic, that is inscriptional evidence that indicates reconciliation. And then we will discuss the sculptures. The Kalika Purana is an important Upapurana composed in Pragjyotisha Kamarupa or ancient Assam in the 9th-10th century to glorify the goddess Kali or Kamaikha. According to this text, it was Vishnu in the Krishna avatar who introduced the worship of this goddess into ancient Assam, which was then known as Pragjyotisha after establishing his son Naraka on the throne. This goddess is regarded as the consort of the great god Shiva. The Kalika Purana, while relating the circumstances under which Kamaikha came to be worshipped in Assam, states that the land was regarded by Shambhu or Shiva as his own domain. Legendary rulers of Assam like Bhagadatta and Bana, as well as rulers of the historical period from Bhaskar Varman in the 7th century right down to Ratnapala in the 10th, 11th century, they were all devotees of Shiva as in the epigraphic sources, as well as contemporary literature like the Harsha Charita of Bana, etc. All the three main ruling dynasties of Assam from the 4th to the 12th centuries of the Common Era trace the genealogy in the copperplate land grants from the legendary ruler Naraka, born of Bhumi Devi, that is the Mother Earth or Bhudevi, and Vishnu in his Varaha avatar. Yet, these grants invariably begin with obeisance paid to different forms of Shiva. So we have this contradiction earlier. Now, the oral traditions and accounts found in texts like the Kalika Purana clearly indicate that the introduction of a new goddess, that is Kamaikha, into Assam led to conflict. The Kalika Purana relates that Vishnu in his Krishna avatar killed the local ruler Ghataka, the Kirata chief. The Kiratas, basically the Indo-Mongoloids, and drove his followers beyond the Dikkara Vasini, that is to the upper reaches of Assam, and installed his own son means Naraka, on the throne, enjoining him to worship the goddess Kamaikha, who resided upon the Nilachala or Blue Hill. Now, blessed by the goddess Kamaikha, Naraka becomes very powerful. However, he soon comes under the influence of his friend, King Bana of Sonitpur, that is modern-day Tezpur city, a staunch Shaivite, and he develops, this is what the Kalika Purana tells us, asuric qualities, that is demonic qualities. When sage Vasishtha, a worshipper of Shiva, approaches the goddess Kamaikha, he is rebuffed by Naraka, who denies him permission to visit Kamaikha. His improper behavior angers the sage, who curses him and says that the goddess Kamaikha would disappear from his kingdom, and without her protection, he would soon meet his end. And in fulfillment of this prophecy, Naraka becomes very arrogant and he attacks Indra, king of the Devas. He robs the earrings of Aditi, the mother of the Devas, and also the umbrella of the god Varuna. Then he kidnaps 16,000 heavenly damsels whom he imprisons in his capital city of Pragjyotishpur. So this is the story we find in the Kalika Purana. Now, arrogant with power, Naraka now asks the goddess to marry him. The goddess promises to be his wife if within a single night he constructs a temple for her on the Nilachal and builds a stairway leading up to it. Now, he had almost completed the task within the stipulated time when the goddess causes a cock to crow, heralding daybreak. An angry Naraka kills the cock, which in Assamese is known as Kukura. And the place is today known as Kukurakota, that is the place where the Murga or cock was killed. To punish Naraka for his evil deeds, Krishna comes to Assam and kills Naraka. And he places his Naraka's son Bhagadatta on the throne. Sage Vasishtha's curse also comes into effect and the gateways of the Kamakhya temple fall down. The earth opens up and the temple disappears. The river Brahmaputra changes its course and the floods all the sacred tirthas, or that is sacred spots like URVASI island. Now this event is very graphically recorded in the Jogini Tantra, a 16th century text. That is how the whole earth shakes. And it appears to be the description of an actual earthquake which shifted the bed of the Brahmaputra and caused the temple to tumble down. Now, the above story illustrates how the region of ancient Assam, particularly the Brahmaputra Valley, was a stronghold of Shaivism. Even today, in spite of the popularity of Neo-Vaishnavism in the medieval period, you find that even today we have much more Shiva temples than Vaishnava shrines. And Vasishtha and Bana are both worshippers of Shiva. Vasishtha was not allowed access to Kamakhya, a goddess whose worship was introduced into the region by VISNU, a Vedic Aryan deity. Local chieftains like Ghataka were killed and the followers displaced. So this is one story of conflict which we have by introduction of Brahmanical, that is, deities. Now the oral traditions also tell tales of Harihara Juddha, that is the battle between Hari, Vishnu and Har, Shiva. Texts like the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Puran refer to the story. It tells us how Bana, the ruler of Sonitpur, had a beautiful daughter named Usha. In a dream, she sees a handsome youth and falls in love with him. Her companion Chitralakha had the gift of being able to draw all living creatures. With her help, the youth is identified as Aniruddha, the grandson of Krishna, that is the son of Pradyumna. Chitralekha, by dint of her magical powers, because Assam was known for its magic and witchcraft, goes to Dwarika and kidnaps Aniruddha while he's fast asleep and brings her to Agnigar, the impregnable fire fortress where Bana had confined his daughter. Aniruddha falls in love with Usha and they lead a happy life in secluded life. Subsequently, Usha's two cousin sisters also marry Aniruddha's cousin brothers with the aid of Chitralekha. All three princesses give birth to sons who grow up into handsome youth. All this happens without the knowledge of Usha's father, Bana. Now, one day, however, the Asura guards who knew magic were patrolling the skies and were surprised to who resembled. So, this is a photo of the present day Agnikar, that place. This is a modern sculpture, okay, who resembled the Yadava Krishna and his kin. So they report the matter to Bana, who immediately arrives at his daughter's apartments and imprisons Aniruddha and his brothers. It is Narada who informs Krishna at Dwarika, where everyone was searching for them. Krishna comes to Sonitpur in Assam and orders Bana to free his grandson and other relations. Bana refuses and war ensues. Bana, a staunch devotee of Shiva, had earlier played musical instruments for his lord while the latter had danced, because Bana was supposed to have 1,000 arms. Now, in his time of need, Bana prays to Shiva for help, and Shiva comes to Sonitpur to rescue his devotee. Thus ensued a fierce battle between Hari and Har, as a result of which the waters of the Brahmaputra turned red with blood. It became the Lohitya, or the Red River. Inscriptions of Assam refer to it as the Lohitya Sagara or Lohitya Sindhu. Now, Krishna causes Shiva to fall asleep and cuts off all but 2 of Bana's arms. And he was about to behead him when Bana started praying to Shiva again, and the latter wakes up and from his slumber and saved him. Upon the mediation of Shiva, Bana freed Aniruddha and his cousins and accepted him as a son-in-law. The present-day name of the town Tezpur is an Assamese word meaning city of blood. Thus, this story also indicates conflict between the followers of Shaivism and Vaishnavism as represented in early texts. So this is this is a modern sculpture, as I said. This is in the present town of Tezpur, so where Agnigar is believed, because we find what you call, it does not date back to the epic period. You do find some fortifications and other things, but archaeologically these date back to the 7th century. So this is just a sculpture, and this is a Mughal artist drawing the defeat of Banasura from Harivamsha, a Mughal folio. So here you can see okay, here Banasur, and this is Krishna. This is Krishna and the war. Now, what you find is, so earlier we find conflict in the oral traditions and traditional text also. But by the 7th century, however, we find that reconciliation has been arrived at. And even much earlier, in the 5th century, we find in the Umachal rock inscription, King Surendravarman, the local king in Gauhati region, he orders the excavation of a cave temple for the Vaishnavite deity Balabhadra Swami. Although the Varmans in the inscription, they all start the land grants with an invocation to different forms of Shiva, like Nata, Raja, etc., Hara, and other things. But here, the king of the ruling family, he has ordered the excavation of a cave temple for Vaishnava deity Balabhadra Swami. So you find that there is more acceptance of Vaishnavism. And we also discover an Aditya stone in western Assam. It's a circular disc with Brihaspati at the center and 12 Adityas, including Vishnu, around him. So while ruling families began to trace their descent from Vishnu, it was Shiva to whom they first paid obeisance, as said earlier. And from the 8th century onwards, we find Vishnu and Shiva sharing common space. Now, this is in a place in Upper Assam called DEOPANI. So this is the inscription of Vishnu here. This is the image of Vishnu. You can see the local physical features. And this you can find is the inscription here. And this is from DEOPANI, and it gives a vivid description of Hara Shiva, who is called, so this is the Vishnu image, but we find that is Shiva being described. He's called, that is obeisances paid to Hara, who is called the Lord of the Three Worlds, who puts on the King of Serpents as the sacred thread, who has the bull as his mount, and who illumines the world with the moon and his crest. The inscription refers to Shiva as Thanu. Again, in the Guwahati grant of Indrapala, Pashupati Shiva is equated with the Mahavaraha, that is Vishnu. Similarly, the Kanauli grant of Vaidyadeva, this is a 12th century text, in the verse 18 describes the king as Parama Maheshwara and also as Parama Vaishnava. Then again, in the Shankar Narayan Deopani image, again in Deopani, this is in the Doyang Dhansari Valley in Upper Assam. So here, this is an inscription, like it is referred to as Shankara Narayan. So that is why historians call it Shankar Narayan. I mean, this is a Harihara image, but the inscription says, it begins with an invocation to Omkara, the manifestation of the Supreme Self. And it is said that one should sing the names of Narayan and Shankara, the spouse of Gauri. So that is why we call it the Shankar Narayan sculpture. And you can find that this, what you call mukut, that is the crown, is very similar to this Harihara image head from Cambodia. That one side is the Jata Mukut, but Kirita Mukuta is not very clearly here. It's just plain here. But here you find partly half, that is, here you find the Trishula, etc. Then you find the Vanamala, and then you can find the Padma, etc. Chakras are not shown very nicely, and here. And in the same place, we find another image of Harihara. Now, this is from Cambodia. This is from Cambodia, and you find these sort of mukuts here. Now, we find the Harihara image, like the earlier speaker had shown us, with consorts, And this one with the consort, this was recovered from North Gauhati. It measures 61 by 73. The central figure of the deity is flanked by Gauri and Lakshmi, consorts of Shiva and Vishnu respectively. It is in Tribhanga, as you can see. And we can find Yajna Upavitamala also here. This is the Yajna Upavitamala. All these things are there. And Vanamala is also there. Then the goddess Gauri has the Jata Mukuta. And Lakshmi has a Karanda Mukuta. And we find heavy ornamentations everywhere here. And below, because here it is not very well seen in this sculpture, but the actual sculpture, you find that is the Vahanas are shown. Vahanas are shown. And generally what you find, that all the figures here are of equal height. That is Shiva, Harihara, and the consorts. Generally, like in Assam, when we look at the Uma Maheshwar sculptures, there Shiva and Parvati are shown same size. But when we look at the Vishnu sculptures, say from Ambari and other places, anywhere in Assam, you find Vishnu is shown larger in size to denote stature or status. And Lakshmi and Saraswati, his two consorts, is generally flanked by Lakshmi Saraswati. They are shown very smaller in size. Now, but this is only where we find with consorts. Other Harihara, we do not find consorts. This is another Harihara image, which is in the Assam State Museum. It was erroneously sort of marked as Vishnu, labeled. But this is a Chaturbhuz image. Now, here you find only, that is, it's on a Vishwapadma pedestal, etc. Okay, this is made of black basalt. So this is also found from Gauhati, and closer what we find, the present director of archaeology, Rekha Koli, she, by studying the image, she saw that it was actually this part is broken. This part is broken. Now, what you find is his adorned with Kirata Mukuta, etc., Kundala, Hara, Yajnopavita. Now it's broken. Now, one figure carries the Gada. Here you can see the Gada. Now the other three are broken, but on the right side of the figure there seems to be an impression of a shula, like this side, that to the figure's right, shula or trishula, you can see the marks. Now don't mutilate it. There are four figures. There are four other figures, two on the middle of the stele, okay, here, etc., and two on the pedestal on either sides. Of the two figures on the middle of the stela, like here, etc. Okay, the one on the right represents Mahishamardini Durga. Here you can find with the lion and all that, because it's the size, it's difficult to show bigger, but here you find that. And on the other with the Kharga, maybe Kalki, like it's standing with the Kharga. You can see here. Now on the pedestal, here you find Ganesha. You find Ganesha here. And also this side you find Garura. So because Garura is there, then this appears to be a figure of Buddha. So if you find the avatars of Vishnu on this side, and Shakti or Mahishamardini Durga and Ganesha, Shaivite deities. So on this basis, this may be identified as what you call Harihara. This is what she feels. Now, we also find a rock cut image. This is in the middle of the Brahmaputra river on an island known as URVASI in Gauhati itself. Now, here this image, it appears to be like, at first we thought it was a devotee, but you see the wings. So this appears to be a wing Garura, and this is Nandi. And this is the Trishula and holding the Akshamala. This is a bit eroded because what happens is during the monsoons, this whole island, it goes underwater. And here you find either the Sankha or the Chakra. It's a bit difficult to make out. So this is another figure of Harihara which we find. They're not very common in Assam actually, Harihara images. And we find these Harihara images only up to the 12th century. At the later period, we find other Brahmanical deities like Vishnu and etc. We find scenes from the epics, but we do not find Harihara. We shall now explore the links of Harihara with Cambodia in Southeast Asia. Now, anthropological studies of place names and linguistic studies have shown that in the remote past, Austroasiatic linguistic groups entered India through the northeast region. In this connection, it may be mentioned that the people of Cambodia belong to the Mon Khmer group, the same linguistic groups as the Mundas and Khasi tribes of India. It is believed that they migrated from India to Indochina when they were invaded by people from India. This is what actually is referred to by in a book called Ancient Art Traditions of Cambodia. Okay. Now the cities of Mons, Pius, and Burmans, being in lowland and geostrategic area, were more prone to mountain-based powers and had close contacts with the Indian counterparts like the Arakanis, the Bengal coast, and the Assam basin, and regular maritime contacts with the Indian subcontinent and Sri Lanka. Now, communion-tree water was not only by the Brahmaputra and its tributaries, but also through the Irrawaddy, Mekong, Menon, Chindwind, and other rivers of Burma or Myanmar. Now, trade through sea route was carried out by a class of people called Vaniks or merchants. Now, Yuan Chang in his Siuki, incidentally, he also comes to Assam, to the kingdom of Kamarupa in the 7th century. That is during the reign of Bhaskar Burman. He states that the Kamarupa rulers had the sea route to China under the protection. Now, it may be noted that some ancient inscriptions in Cambodia, which date back to 629, were written both in Khmer and Sanskrit script. Now, there is an inscription dated in Khmer in Saka 925 on the stele of a sculpture identified as that of Yama, which mentions that Wap Brahmaputra made a petition to King Jaya Veera Varman regarding an endowment made by his ancestor named Pand Tokura Acharya Dharmadhipati. The mention of Brahmaputra and an inscription of Cambodia indicates earlier contacts of Southeast Asia with Eastern India. That is around 7th century. Now, this apart, similar inscribed sculptures, that is of Harihara and Vishnu, are found at DEOPANI in the Doyang Dhansiri Valley, datable to 7th, 8th, which indicates development of syncretism in art. And it is also indicated by iconography and the inscriptions, etc. Now, there was probably close contact between Northeast India and Southeast Asia through the river route for trade, which is reflected in the art of Assam in the Dhansiri Valley. Though the art of Assam is fundamentally based on Indian traditional art system, it was essentially regional in style and sometimes displays a synthesis of certain Southeast Asian elements. Now, the influence of Indian art and culture in present-day Cambodia and Indonesia has already been adequately discussed by a host of scholars and does not merit repetition here. While the story of trade and cultural intercourse between India and these lands is well known, less known is the connection between Assam with Cambodia or Kamboja and Indonesia. With reference to the island of Bali in Indonesia, Brahminical culture was established there prior to the 6th century. Now, the Chinese chronicles of the Liang dynasty in the 6th century states that in Bali, the king's family name is Kondinya. When asked about his ancestors, he could not state this, but said that his wife was the wife of Suddhodana was the daughter of his country, that is of the Kondinya country. In Borneo too, 5th century inscriptions in the Sanskrit language refer to a king called Mula Varman, son of Ashwa Varman, and grandson of King Kundunga, a form of Kondinya. Then again in Indochina or Cambodia, that is Funan, etc., part of which was known as Funan towards the end of 4th or beginning of 5th, an Indian Brahmin named Kondinya was elected king. These we find from references. Now, the Mysore inscription of King Prakasha Dharma Vikramavarma, dated 579 of the Saka era, that is 657 CE, corroborates the accounts of the Cambodian annals and Chinese chronicles by clearly stating that the founder of the kingdom was a Brahmana called Kondinya. Now, the late historian Kanaklal Borua from Assam believes that the Brahmana referred to as Kondinya hailed from Kundin in Assam, that is in extreme eastern Assam. According to him, Kundina or Kundila, located in Khodia in the easternmost corner of Assam, presently it's in Arunachal, are the ruins of an ancient city which local legends associated with Kundil Nagar or Bhishmaka Rukmini fame. Moreover, Kondinya is also one of the 33 gotras of Nagara Brahmins as found in the Nagara Pushpanjali. N. Vasu also states that Kondinya and Kondinya Koshika are the clan names of Vaidika Brahmins of Bengal, Sylhet, and Kamarupa, that is Assam. The beneficiaries of all the land grants in Assam prior to the 13th century are all Brahmins, and many of them may have belonged to the Kondinya clan. However, Borua opines that it is not improbable I'm not saying that it's possible, but it's not improbable that there should be a settlement of Kaundinya Brahmins in the Sadia region near the Kundin River. That Brahmins were an influential group with rights over land and monopoly over education and also administrative posts is clearly indicated by the inscriptions of Assam. P.N. Bhattacharjee refers to a local tradition which holds that a colony of Brahmins was settled by Parashuram in the region presently known as Kundilnagar. Hence, there is a great possibility that the founder of the Cambodian kingdom of Funan was a Kaundinya, that is a Brahmana belonging to the Kaundinya Gotra who hailed from Assam. So this is basically the connection. And now we shall go on to other examples of syncretism in the art. In the inscription of King Dharmapala of Kamrup. So this is not Dharmapala of the Pala dynasty of Bengal, but of the Kamrupa dynasty. I mean, they have same names and they were contemporaries actually, not both Dharmapalas, but the Pala rulers. We find the king invoking the Ardha Narishwara form of Shiva, like it refers to the Ardha Yuvatishwara. Now, both the Khonamukh and Shubhankara grant of this ruler begins with an invocation to the Ardha Narishwara form of Shiva. It says, who is the foremost of all gods, who wears a blue lotus in the vara, and the jewel of the hood of the snake as the ornaments of the ears, whose person is besmeared with saffron, applied to the large and high breast, and with ashes, and who is at this where the only embodiment of both the erotic Shringara sentiment and the sentiment of anger or Rudra. Now, the Kalika Purana also, an Upapurana composed in Assam, in chapter 45, verses 164 to 175, 164 to 175, describes the form of Ardhanarishwara, form of the deity that is constituted of equal parts, according to the Kalika Purana, of Kali and Shiva, symbolizing the female and male elements. While half the hair is plaited and knotted, the other half is a cluster of matted hair. An earring and a snake adorns the 2 ears of the female and male half of the body respectively. Now, while the female half's eye resembles that of a deer, it is called Mrigakhi. The male half has the eye of a bull or Vrishabhakshi. The female half of the nose resembles a sesame flower, like it is written Til Pushpa Nasanga, while the male half is thick and flat. Now, the Shiva Purana relates the circumstances leading to the emergence of this form of Shiva. This I won't go into because all of you are familiar. Now, images of this form of the deity are very rare in Assam, as this composite deity is worshipped primarily in the non-anthropomorphic form. So we find the Shiva Linga in Jonipet in many temples. As I said, in the Shiva temples, you find the Shiva Linga in Jonipet, and the Purohit, that is the priest, they refer to this as the Ardhanarishwara. That is an iconic representation, not anthropomorphic representation. So in the form of a linga in Jonipet, and a large number of these lingas in Jonipet was found during the Ambari excavations, and we find throughout the length and breadth of Assam, very few actually Uma Maheshwara and other sculptures. There are some still in situ, but presently all are worshipped in this form. Now, and at Devasthan in central Assam, an image was reportedly discovered on the center of a lintel of a ruined temple. This was actually noted by the late Raj Mohan Nath, a government servant, and in his book, The Background of Assamese Culture, he refers to this. But when we went to the site, we could not find it. So the description he gives, the left half of the image represented Shiva with his Vahana Nandi, while the right half represented his consort with a full breast, and below her stands a lion. Above the deity are 2 Vidyadharas. Due to the eroded condition of the sculpture, other details cannot be ascertained. This is what he writes. But unfortunately, when we went to this region which he has described, we only found a sculpture of Uma Maheshwar on the lintel and not Ardhanarishwara. Now, besides this, this is from Gauhati area on a hill called Chatrakar. Chatrakar because it is shaped like an umbrella. That is, it's called Chatrakar Parbat. So this is a sculpture of Indra. Now, this is unusual. Now, at present, this sculpture is in the Assam State Museum. It was recovered from the Chatrakar hill in Gauhati along with an image of Brahma, both of which are now in the museum. The image of Brahma is the typical iconographic picture, that is, pot-bellied with a beard. I mean, holding pustaka and ladle and other things, and with the swan or hamsa below, etc. Now, this image depicts the deity as, see here you can see the Kirti Mukh, and this Vidyadhara has been eroded. One Vidyadhara is here, but here you can see a 5-hooded serpent. Very clear. 1, 2, 3, then these 2 hoods are broken. It's a 5-hooded serpent. Now, according to Sarveswar Kakoti, the then Director General of Archaeology in India, he confirmed the identification, but you find Airavat here. You find Airavat here as that of Indra on the arguments that the sculptor had made an attempt to identify Indra with Krishna's elder brother Balarama, who is sometimes depicted with a snake hood. Moreover, Vishnu is often called Upendra, denoting the status of Indra as his elder brother. Now, this is a 44 centimeters by 23 centimeters figure. So as you can see, it's standing on the pedestal, and you have the Vahana, etc. And you find Varada Mudra and etc. The right hand is in Varada Mudra and the left is in Abhay Mudra. Here, Varada Mudra, Abhay Mudra, etc. And you can see crowns, etc. And flanked by one male attendant. And here, female attendant with the chori of Livis, etc. A bronze image of Indra recovered from Narakapur Road in Udalbakra village on the southern fringes of Gauhati city displays features of Palasena art. And there the deity is mounted upon his elephant, and he's on a Padmapitha, etc. And but there you do not find that is what you call the snake hood. It is only here you find. Now again, this snake hood, like association of snakes, this is in Tezpur area, which was the city of Bana. Now here you find Ganga Jamuna, and here you find the hands that is in Pranam Mudra, that is in prayer, Naga and Nagi. Naga and Nagi, I'll show you a close-up here. You can see the Nagi and the Naga. And this runs up right, this snake thing, it runs up right here. Like this it goes. Now, this Dwapar gateway is dated by S.K. Saraswati to the 5th century. And it appears as if like it is very similar to the Nakshnakuthara one and Ganga Jamuna. And here you have the swans, etc. So here it is like it is depicted in other places of India. Okay. So this is 5th century. The Hamsa are there, garlands are there. So these are the typical river goddesses. Now the Kurma and the Makara have been sort of eroded over time because it's so old. But this was unearthed in the Ambari excavation. The background is not finished, and here actually you find, like when we look at the actual sculpture, you find here the Hamsa, it is engraved. Just as these designs were engraved, here you find the Hamsa is engraved but not nicely. And it has a very unfinished look, like the Ganga on the Makara and Jamuna on the Kurma. And they are holding lotus stalks in the arms. And here also you find the lotus motifs, etc. But what is interesting is Ganga has a tree-hooded serpent canopy, and Jamuna has a single-hooded one, serpent canopy. This is very clearly there. This is very clearly there. So marking the association with the river. So here you have the Nagas and Nagis, because symbolically also Nagas and Nagis and snakes, they denote the river. And Assam is a tropical land with lots of rivers. So Naga Nagi worship, you find many sculptures also of Nagas, etc. worship. But here they are in association with Naga Nagis. But in this sort of a syncretism has been arrived at, in which they are themselves given snake hoods. Like Manasa sculptures, that is the snake serpent goddess Manasa, you find with the serpent hood sitting on a lotus pedestal or her feet on the ghat. Sometimes a snake is entwined around her body. But Ganga Jamuna, here you find, I'm not sure whether such sculptures are there in other parts of India. Now again, this is, you find sculptures of Vishnu This is 18th century. This is 18th century. This is built by the Ahoms who came from Upper Burma and the southern part of China. And this was built under their patronage. So whether this is a whether this is the depiction of Balaram with the snake hood, I'm not sure. Here, initially, when I saw this sculpture on the left-hand side, I thought it was Lakshmi. But on closer examination, it was seen to be a male figure. So I have identified this. But like Vishnu here is sitting up on the lotus, and he's wearing a crown, like a king's crown, not the usual Kirata Mukuta. And so I have identified this with the Saranga, Vishnu's Veena Saranga, and he's sitting here, as you can see. Now this, so you can find this appears to be a sword rather than the Gada. This is a Padma. Then this is the Chakra, and this is the Shankha. So this may be again standing on the Padma, and it's very much evident that it's a male figure. And you can see it's a very different depiction with Mongoloid features, which probably, you know, because in that area today, even if you go to these villages where this Jagadhatri temple is in Kalugao and all that in Upper Assam, you find people with Mongoloid features, like the Ahoms and all, they have features like this, like a bit geometrical and Mongoloid features. Like you can see the jaws and all are different. So these Vishnu are quite different from the earlier ones. So this I have tentatively identified as maybe Balarama, because identified with Sheshnak. I don't know. It's a 9 who opened. Maybe someone can give me some idea. And this in Vasishtha temple in Gauhati, this sculpture, this is an image of Brahma, which is again very different. Again, very different. And here you find in all the, like it is a 4-faced image, okay? The female, I mean, the sculpture is standing like this, or the drapery you can see, drapery, and the 4 hands are given in a different form, not like the usual earlier 4-handed images of deities in, say, the early period. So, but the Vasishtha temple was built in the early part of the 19th or the later part of the 18th century, according to the inscriptions. But what you find there is that this is not part of the wall temples. I mean, this was just, maybe it was found somewhere and kept here. That is what it appears. And there are 4 faces. Like you can see the round face and the crown. There is no beard. There is no beard whatsoever. I mean, Brahma always generally has a beard. And we have other sculptures of Brahma where Brahma has beard in 18th century temples also, but not here. And it is standing. Generally, we find Brahma riding on the swan, and the figure is solid. It is like a 2-sided figure, but the faces are 4, like 1, 2, 3, and the other one is behind the head. And then in all the 4 hands, see, with the thumb is holding a book, that is holding the pushti. So maybe this denotes the 4 Vedas. So maybe someone can help me with this. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. And basically, when we look at the art of Assam, today I didn't go into other features. I was just looking at the syncretic images. You find both, say, from the Ganga Valley, as well as some things from like the Vishnu image from DEOPANI and others. Some Southeast Asian things are there. And there are some other sculptures which look like sculptures of Cambodia, etc. But because of time and all that, I did not put too many photos in the slides. Thank you.